To make real food, you need a great recipe, passed down from generation to generation. Welcome to Real Food, Real Kitchens, the show that goes into real kitchens of everyday people to tell the story of a dish and the families and cultures that bring it to life.
This is my real kitchen, my real family, and my real recipe for my dad's potato pie.
You can get this recipe and many more by visiting realfoodrealkitchens.com.
Hi, my name is Liz, and this is my sister Anna.
Hi.
And today we're making for you a recipe that our father taught us. It is a Puerto Rican version of a shepherd's pie. And it's a recipe that we have been enjoying for many years in our family. We make it every year on Thanksgiving, and it's always the one thing on the Thanksgiving table that goes pretty quickly.
Yes. And it's what everybody fights, the leftovers.
Yes, everybody wants the leftovers.
Yes.
So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to start with one of the components of the dish, which is a plátano. In English, a plátano is a plantain, and this particular plátano is a sweet plátano. Now, when I was a kid, this was actually one of the first things that my dad taught me how to cook. He would cut up the plátanos for me, and then I would help him with the frying part. And he taught me how to know when they were done, and just to kind of create a simple side dish for our family dinners. Now, usually when a plátano is ripe, you'll see them in the supermarket. Sometimes they're green, that's when they're not ripe at all. Sometimes they're yellow. The best is when they are mostly or almost completely black. That's when they are sweet and delicious. Get a good amount of oil in there. I usually cook them, I would say, on medium high. So it is a pretty high heat. So this dish is actually almost like a combination of a Puerto Rican dish that's called pastelón. And the pastelón is layers of the plátanos with Spanish style meat, like a picadillo meat, and cheese. And it gets baked in the oven almost like a lasagna. So this dish is almost like a twist on that and a shepherd's pie together. So, there we go, a little sizzle. Okay. And the easiest way to peel a plátano is to cut off the two ends, cut a slit down the middle, and then it just peels right off. Can't really peel it like a banana. So it takes a little bit longer for the first side to brown. Once the first side is nice and brown and caramelized and you flip them over, the second side actually cooks really quickly. So what I do while the first side is frying, I make sure I have a plate that's lined with paper towels ready for when I'm ready to take them out. The paper towels will soak up all that extra oil that we don't want in our dish. I like them nice and brown because then they really start to caramelize and the sweetness comes out. Yeah, so the second side's already nice and brown, so just gonna scoop them out. That one looks done. And that's it. Now they just cool off while I make the other parts of the dish. So yes, when I was 5 and my sister was 18, our mother passed away. And at the time, she had done all of the cooking in the family. So my dad took on the role. He took on the role, right. And he really just used what he learned from watching his parents and started creating his own dishes. And I can clearly remember the first time he took me to the grocery store and he said to me, I'm going to make rice and beans. And I was super excited because he had never done this before. But I was also, even as a little girl, a little bit skeptical, like, does he know how to do this? And he bought his ingredients, threw it together, and I remember eating like at least 2 plates of it. It was amazing, that first try. And since then, he's just been going strong since then. He has always loved cooking. He's always loved putting his own creative twist on things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even the recipes that we use that are his, when we make them, he will still critique them because maybe we should have done one thing different.
Well, I have to say, sometimes I'm making one of his recipes, and I'm doing it the way that I'm pretty sure I've seen him do it before, the way I wrote it down, and something just doesn't quite taste the way I want it to taste. He will walk over, taste it, and like instantly know what it is that needs to be added, and it's like just how it's supposed to be. So he's always had a knack for that. Yeah. And also using like unusual ingredients that I would say, you're putting that in there? And he just knows like how to put certain flavor combinations together, and it works. So
yeah,
so
he could have been a chef.
He could have. He might have.
Yeah.
So, sofrito is like the base for many, many, many Spanish dishes. So if you were making a pot of beans, you would put sofrito as the base seasoning. It's like a combination of cilantro. In Spanish they call it recal, but I think it's called culantro in the supermarket. Okay, so for the meat portion of our pie, I like to use ground turkey. In the past, we used to make it with ground beef. I mean, it really could be made either way. I've just gotten very used to having it with the ground turkey. So really what the meat portion of the pie is, it's like a picadillo. So I'll cut up some onions. Onions, pepper, and garlic pretty much go into any dish that I'm making. And then another little shortcut. Let's use this to chop up my onions quickly. Get the meat browning with the onions. Put it there. Water. I put it on, well, right now I put it on high just to give the pan just a quick minute to heat up, but usually I lower it down to like medium high while I'm browning it, and then it will go down even lower as it starts to simmer. Throw in my onions while I brown it. This was a big red pepper. I would say typically I use about a half of a red pepper and 1 medium onion. Since this pepper was large, I didn't quite use half of it. Yep, that looks like a good amount. Dump that in. And everything should start browning up pretty quickly. So when my dad was growing up, his parents had moved here from Puerto Rico, and they moved to Spanish Harlem. He lived in Spanish Harlem with his brothers and sisters and his parents, and there were actually 8 siblings. So it's a large family. But within that same building, he had cousins and aunts and uncles. It was just the extended family, all within that same, I think, building, or at least on the same block. Yeah. So as he got older, I know when he was a kid, like the family gatherings were he's talked about his family, and he has memories of like his dad cooking and his brothers being involved, maybe not in the most helpful of ways, but they would cook together. So eventually the family moved down to the Lower East Side, which is where actually they still live today. So most of our family gatherings growing up, we were on the Lower East Side.
Well, I loved the weekends. I loved spending days there, weeks there, wandering through the streets because it's such a, as you know, New York City is just filled with so many different types of food, so many different types of people. So from one moment to the next, you're smelling different food, meeting different people, and you get to taste and try so many different types of food at such a young age, and it's like it opened me up to know that there's not just one type of cooking and one type of people and one type of food. So that was amazing.
Yeah.
Plus being around my grandparents as they cooked.
So when I was younger, I first learned to make this, picadillo, for our pastelillo recipe. Pastelillos are empanadas, basically. And we would take the same meat, and we would fill the empanadas with the meat, sometimes with meat and cheese, meat and chopped up plátanos. So yes, I remember learning to make this meat because it's used in quite a few different recipes. And another thing that we've done with this meat, a lot of times we'll eat it just with some white rice, and my dad would mix a can of beans in, and then it turns almost into like a chili on rice. So that looks pretty brown. I'm going to add the garlic now. I usually add 3 or 4 cloves, so I'm going to go with 4. When I measure my spices, again, I'm never exact, but I measure it out in my palm. That was probably about a teaspoon of thyme. And then I'm going to put in some black pepper, oregano. Again, I just measure out like a palmful, sprinkle it in, maybe a little extra for good luck. The crushed red pepper, it really depends on how spicy you like things. When I'm cooking for my children, sometimes I leave this out completely. Otherwise, I'll just put, a little bit. Everybody else seems to enjoy a little bit of heat, so just a little handful of crushed red pepper. I'm going to add some pimientos, which are like the pickled version of the red peppers. Put some olives in. This is when it really starts to smell like Puerto Rican food. Once you get the sofrito in there, I get like a nice big, like maybe 2 tablespoons, nice big spoonfuls of it. Get it all mixed up, saute it a little bit longer. Okay, and that's really it for the spices. The tomatoes are what I use to make it red. I know what I forgot. I did forget one spice. Where is my adobo? Okay, so adobo is an all-purpose seasoning. It's basically like a seasoned salt, I guess. So I'll use the adobo because it has a little extra flavor in it, but then I don't put as much salt as I might ordinarily put if I wasn't using adobo. So again, I just measure it out in my palm, sprinkle it in, and now when I go to put the salt, a dish where maybe I didn't put adobo, I might put 2 teaspoons of salt. For this dish, I'll just put the 1 because I put adobo in it. I don't want it to be too salty. All the meat is nicely coated, so I add the chopped tomatoes. A cupful of water. And now while that water and the tomatoes cook down, it can simmer. It really only takes about a half an hour or so. I lower the heat down to medium-low. Not so low that it won't bubble, but I don't want the bottom to burn either. So I put it down to medium-low, and I'll leave it for about a half an hour. And in a half an hour, when it's just about done, if I'm still preparing another part of the dish, I'll just turn it down to low and let it simmer some more. The longer it simmers, the more the flavors blend together. So
on Sundays, the whole family would gather at my grandparents' and just enjoy. Everybody was looking forward to the food because for lunch there was usually the chicken soup.
The chicken soup.
So good.
And there were so many of us. This was a small
Yes.
apartment on the Lower East Side. We would all come together, cousins, aunts, uncles, all of us together. And we would take turns eating in shifts at the table, and everybody always had so much fun. We just enjoyed it. Yeah, and our grandmother,
The whole day centered around
the food. It's so true.
Yeah.
So this is my sister, Anna, and she is an amazing cook.
Thank you.
You are. And on holidays, and not even just holidays, yesterday was a birthday in our family, we usually always end up in the kitchen together. Usually it's always a team effort, right? So she's going to help me with the potatoes. I'll peel and pass it to you. I hear the pitter-patter of little feet next to me somewhere. Hey, baby. Yeah. So see, I'm peeling up. Guess what I'm making? We're going to make the potatoes together. I'm peeling up the potatoes. Nina's going to chop them up. This is the potatoes. So, you're going to help me? Okay. That's for you. Charlie will pass me the potatoes as I need them. So this is a 5-pound bag of potatoes. I usually just make the whole bag. I make the mashed potatoes, and quite often I have leftover mashed potatoes after I put the pies together. But I just use them for, leftovers on another night. So, oh my God, that's a Nina? Wow, look at the size of that potato.
Hey, I want to give it.
That's huge. Thank you. So my boys do like to help me cook, but I think they enjoy more the baking. We haven't gotten too much to this kind of thing yet. Alrighty. Rinse them off, I didn't wash them. Salt the water a little bit for the potatoes. And once they come to the boil, it's just about 20 minutes, and they're usually soft. I test them with a fork to make sure that they're soft enough, but usually it's about 20 minutes once they start boiling. And the meat is finally starting to cook down a little bit. Sauce is still a little bit thinner than I like it, but it's definitely starting to cook down. So I have something I'd like to share. When I was a teenager, when my dad was teaching me how to cook, I would stand next to him, watch him preparing the meal, and I would jot down his recipes in as much detail as I could. And all these years later, I still have my notebook. This little notebook has been used so much over the years, it is literally falling apart. But there are definitely some treasures in here. I have my dad's potato salad. I have his beans. I have his rice recipe, his Spanish rice. So he taught me how to make both rice with beans and then also rice with gandules, the pigeon peas. So I still have my original notebook from when I was in high school with all of the recipes that I jotted down. So they are so used that some of them are hard to read at this point. I'm pretty sure I need to rewrite them. This one, I guess I used it in the kitchen a lot. There's sauce on it, but but it's still here. It's intact. I will definitely be passing them on to my own children. Spaghetti sauce.
I like that one.
Do you think I use this one a lot?
And near the stove.
This one, I remember doing this one in college.
Yeah.
Charles probably remembers that. Okay, so I'm going to just make sure that these potatoes are soft enough to use a fork if I can poke through them. And strain them. So this is my sister-in-law, Kathy. She's helping me out today. She's going to make the salad to go with our main dish. So in the meantime, while she makes the salad, I'm going to get the potatoes mashed so that we can get this pie in the oven. Okay, so I love my potato ricer. Not everybody uses them, but I like to make my mashed potatoes really smooth. I tried to make mashed potatoes at my sister's house a couple of months ago. I didn't know that she didn't have a ricer. She manages to make her potatoes very smooth and creamy without a ricer. I couldn't do it. Alrighty, I think that's probably about enough. Because this full bowl of potatoes will definitely be enough to cover 2 pies, which is what I plan to make tonight for dinner. Okay, so the first thing I always put in is the butter. I just put a little bit more than a half a stick. About maybe 3/4 of a stick. Okay, now I season my potatoes with some black pepper. A little bit of salt. Probably about a teaspoon and a half maybe. And then I use a combination of milk and heavy cream. And I would say I probably put about 3/4 to a cup of each, but I do like to put it in slowly, whip it, see what the consistency is, and then add more if I need to. Because once I put too much, that's not easy to fix. So put some milk in there. Parmesan cheese is something that my dad has always put in the potatoes for this particular recipe. So I put in about 3/4 of a cup. Just gonna eyeball it though. In total, it ends up to be about 1/4 of a cup of cream, 1/4 of a cup of milk. Okay, so let's see. So they're smooth and creamy, but they're still thick enough where they hold their shape because they're going to be almost like a dome on top of the pie. So the first layer of the pie, this is just a store-bought frozen pie crust. The first layer is going to be the meat. I would say I fill the crust about halfway up with meat. Just about halfway. I have my helper here to put the plátanos on top. So if you can make them in a nice circle and fill in the middle. Okay? This is my son. He's 7 years old, and he does help me in the kitchen. He especially likes baking. Do you want to say hi, Charlie?
Hi.
Look at the camera and say hi.
Hi.
What do you think? Does that look good to you, Charlie?
Yeah.
Do you see any big empty spaces that need to be filled? Right there. Perfect. The meat and the plátanos together really almost fill up the pie crust. So the potatoes end up being like a dome on the top. So, start by putting a big dollop in the middle, off to the side. I think that should be good. Make it nice and smooth and pretty. And now the last thing that I do before I put it into the oven, I'm going to put just a sprinkling of breadcrumbs on top to make sure that the top of the potatoes get nice and crispy and crunchy when they're in the oven. And the breadcrumbs brown nicely, so it makes it look nice and golden brown when it's finished baking. Okay. So that will bake between 45 minutes and an hour until it's nice and golden brown on top, and also the crust will get golden brown. I just think from our own childhood, food was the thing that always brought our family together. And now we're older, there are grandkids and, well, our own kids, which would be my dad's grandkids, and then some of them even have their own kids. And I just feel like when we gather as a family, to this day, food is always the central part of the gathering, and it brings us all together. It really does. And most of the time, when we're cooking for a family gathering, we're in the kitchen together, It's teamwork. If our other sister's around, she's helping. Our sister-in-law also helps out in the kitchen. Everybody kind of has something that they contribute to the meal. And then when we all sit down together, it's just like a bonding experience.
For me, because our family, we didn't have money, and there wasn't a lot of things to pass on and things to inherit. But having this, being given this gift, which to me is one of the greatest treasures, because the memory of cooking and learning from my grandparents and all the wonderful meals that I shared with my family and my extended family, and being able to pass that love on to my nieces and my nephew and my son and my sister, it's like that to me, I realize is like what the treasure really is, because that's priceless. You can't put a price on that. You can't.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it, for me, is the thing that makes me feel most connected to my culture. Definitely. I was never taught how to speak Spanish when I was a child. I grew up on Long Island. So food has always been the thing that's made me feel connected to my heritage and my culture. Okay, it looks good, and I think it's time to eat. Everybody, dinner's ready.
Join us next time on Real Food, Real Kitchens, when we'll tell the story of a new dish and the family and culture that bring it to life. Thank you for watching Real Food, Real Kitchens. You can get this recipe and many more by visiting realfoodrealkitchens.com.
Perfect for potatoes. Do you want to help with the potatoes, or are you done?
I'm done.
You're done, okay.
I'm done.
Go ahead, sweetie.
Potatoes.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Okay.